Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I actually have a lecture how to be better parents and grandparents, but I'm sure you've all heard it because I've done that lecture so many times over the years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few points from this lecture, but most of the thing we want to do is just have an open discussion in terms of what is spiritual parenting and what is basically apagida in terms of create a really spiritual atmosphere in a house. Now, I remember when Bhai Jagjit Singh used to come to our house. One of the first things he always said to us, he goes, "There's a lot of sukh in our house. There's a lot of sage in our house." And I thought that was a strange comment because most people don't say that when they come to your house. You know? No one really comes to your house and says, "ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਘਰ ਵਿੱਚ sage ਬਹੁਤ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ sukh ਬਹੁਤ ਹੈ." It's an odd comment, you know. But it's interesting because I thought, ekadam, they pick up on these things. You must have gone to other people's houses, and sometimes you can straight away pick up that there's tension in this house. I remember once we were in Southall, myself and Bhai Jagjit Singh, we just done a lecture at Park Avenue, Gurdwara, and this family kept saying to us, "You've got to come to our house, you've got to come to our house," and we, as you this is not what we do. We're not like sons or anything. We don't go to people's houses just to have langar. We're just here basically just do our seva when we need to get back. And they were saying no, they were very insistent. And so Bhai Jagjit Singh said to me, "Chalo na, let's just go." You know? So we went, and I'll tell you, Bhai Jagjit Singh is quite blunt, and so when they started bringing it, the daughter-in-law and the sus, you could easily tell that there was tension in there. And because one used to come with something and the other one used to come, but they never used to come together. And so straight away I picked up on it, and Bhai Jagjit Singh picked on it, but I was very polite, I didn't say anything. And Bhai Jagjit Singh just said, "Chalo ithe aake baitho ha." And that's what he glass loni hai. And then straight away he goes, "Thanu sirf sade vich rab dasta hai." That you're doing seva of us as if we're something special. But thanu ek duje de vich rab nahi dasta. That there's tension between you two. And then basically he started saying to a minute that basically all this other seva that you do is totally worthless if you can't do seva of the people in your house. In the same way, the first thing we need to realise in our households, it doesn't matter if someone's amritari or not amritari, if someone's into Sikhi or not, it's a good practice to treat everyone in that way that you're doing seva of them. So you start making your house a bit like a Gurdwara. So it's not a case of you go to a Gurdwara jaake pandiyan di seva kari jao and don't do anything at house. So I'll give you a good example. Come forward, because everyone just sits too far away, then I have to speak louder. Just come. Basically, the first thing I would say is a very important lesson. When I was young, and I'd been, like most Punjabi boys, we've been a bit spoiled, because we've got mums and people that do everything for us. I went to Bhai Son Singh's house. I was very blessed that when I took Amrit, the Panj Pyare put a condition on me that I have to go to Bhai Son Singh's house every morning to do Amrit Villa. And that condition was for 3 months. But my trip that we just carried on doing similar. And that's the thing, if anyone took Amrit in Slough, they would just go to Bhai Son Singh's house between 12 or whenever, 2 o'clock, etc. every day. Bhai Son Singh, he just has Maharaj Prakash there, and his door's open, and he will do Simran with everybody. And he's made so many people spiritual jivans just by doing Simran with them in his house. And so we used to go to Bhai Son Singh's house to do Simran, Amrit Villa. And one thing was very noticeable for me was that all the young bachche, you guys got young bachche there, all his grandchildren, they used to be asleep. But at Amrit Vela, he used to pick them up, and basically he used to just lay them on a little chadar in Maharaj's room. So even though they were still resting, they were in that atmosphere where there was Simran going on. And Maharaj Kripa, we do the same thing with our children. Our children go to school, they get tired, but when we do our Amrit Vela in Maharaj's Kamra that we have on the top floor, we basically just pick the children up and we just sit in there. Sometimes they're awake and they'll listen to some other part, and sometimes they'll just fall asleep again. It's fine, we don't say to them that you have to be awake or you have to be asleep. But they're in that atmosphere. because they're always just watching things, they're seeing things, and they're in an atmosphere where there's Simran going on. And that is very important. People don't recognise the importance of that. You know? And then I remember Bhai Jagjit Singh, once I went round his house and he was changing the nappy of his grandchildren. And being like a typical Punjabi, stereotypical, I said to him, Bhai Jagjit, you know, and he started laughing at me, innit? He goes, nay, he goes, basically, gursikhs. And it's very important words there. He goes, gursikhs. And then another day I went round his house and we were just chatting and he was washing the dishes. And I said to him, Bhai Jagjit, you know, he knew I was winding him up. He goes, Bhai Jagjit, and he goes, and this is the thing, you see how it's not like we think of household things as a chore. This is the way our mind is programmed, as that this is a household chore. And even the word chore is wrong because it's like you have to do something and it's not nice. But as gursikhs, it's like this is seva. Because in my house is full of gursikhs and I'm doing their seva. And if you start thinking everything like that, your children start thinking it like that. If you say to your children that this is a chore, you got to wash my car and I'll give you £5 for it, then they think of it as a chore and I give you something but I want something in return. If you say to them, I want you to wash your car because it's only seva, then they'll start thinking, actually I'm just doing seva for our family. And it's a different type of mentality. I remember when I went to India and I went to see this Pacific family because I wanted to know where the local Ranswais were. And when I was asking in that parent, okay, do you know this person? I'm looking for that person. Everybody said to me, oh, them people are amazing people. They're amazing people. And I said, why? He goes, every year they have a contrast and they take all the furniture outside of their house and basically they will just clean the house top to bottom before they bring Maharaj to the house. They goes, everybody in the Lakka knew that. And you see how they basically created that environment around them where their seva is speaking for them. So there's two things straight away. First thing is that stop thinking of things in your house as chores and start thinking as seva. Stop thinking as your children, or your parents as parents, start thinking of them as gursikhs. And if you start thinking of them like that, then it's not like I have to do this for you, it's more like I have to do seva. So your mind naturally gets into that adat of everything is seva. And I just need to do it. And it becomes automatic. And when you come to the Gurdwara, everything becomes automatic. And that is a good practice to get into even with your children. I remember when we went to, you know, when we fly away, because we live in a Lakka where we're not, apart from Bradford Gurdwara, where you don't see many gursikhs. So when we were at Heathrow Airport, there was some Monday on far away, and our children just have this natural thing where every time they see a gursikh, they'll just go up to him and hug him. And so our children ran across the airport thing, where you got all the baggage and everything, saw these Monday, I knew him from Southall, just went up to him and just hugged him. Said, why did you call so? And the Monday are totally shocked. You know, who are these little kids? They just come up to him and hug him and say, Father, because our kids are happy to see gursikhs. And even like recently we were in Canada, and everywhere the gursikhs, oh, yeah, sings it. The children get so excited. And because that's a good thing, it's a char. You have biyar with other gursikhs everywhere. And people, they lose that thing. Because it's like, oh, it's every day, or it just happens. And these kind of char is really good. Because gursikh kande na char handa si. There was a story about Bhai Jagjit Singh where gursikhs were coming to the village for kirtan, and Bhai Sahib always wore really flashy kind of suits kind of thing. You see him in a lot of his pictures because he was a lawyer by trade and he was quite affluent. And when the gursikhs came, he started singing the shout, and he physically started rolling on the ground in front of the gursikhs, and the gursikhs were picking him up. And this is the thing, in Pratan gursikhs, it wasn't that Bani was, Sikhi was just like a philosophy and you just talk about Pyara Gursikhs. It was very, very practical. When they used to leave for Smagams, after Smagams, you used to often hear Gursikhs crying. I saw that in Italy, we went to Italy, and when the Sangata left, a lot of the Gursikhs were crying that all these Gursikhs on Sharkita. It becomes very, very practical. So this is the first thing in your house. how are you going to reduce the amount of glares or the amount of misunderstandings or the amount of issues they have in your house? Because Sikhi is very, becomes very superficial if all your Sikhi is that you wear bana and you go to a Gurdwara. If you haven't got Sage in your house, and because everyone that comes to your house will automatically pick up straight away, you don't need to say anything, it just becomes the atmosphere in your house. So what you need to look at, if Sikhi is really practical, you need to get to a situation, one of the best presents, one of the best gifts as a parent you can teach your children is the gift of learning how not to argue. And learning how not to get into glares, how basically, because children will naturally do that, but if you've got a very calm, serene atmosphere around you in your house, the children, that becomes part of their personality. One of the personality, so they get very uncomfortable where there's glares. Because I know that with like my daughter, Gurmat, she's very soft-billed. If she sees anyone even shouting or talking a bit loud, she gets a bit nervous because they're not used to it. And I think that's a very positive thing. I don't think that's a negative thing. I think it's a very positive thing for people to be growing up in environments where there's a lot of Sage. Because they'll always find that. If you've grown up, everyone's situation is different. If you've grown up in an environment where your parents are arguing a lot, you find naturally your phrases that you use, naturally the way you talk, you've picked up on them things. And naturally that will come out of you as well. In the same way, if you've got parents that have set a very good example and not argued in front of you, naturally you will do the same thing as well. And glares is in a cycle, it becomes generational. So if your grandparents did a lot of glares, you'll find that your parents do a lot of glares. And you'll find that you and your wife will do a lot of glares, and the same with your children. If your grandparents are really Sejale, you find naturally it rubs off on your parents. And naturally it rubs off on you. But it's a conscious decision in your house, because this is the first stage of parenting. The first stage of parenting is what environment are you bringing children? Because all our children are going to become intelligent. All our children are going to become professionals. That is more or less a given now. We put them in the best schools, and we help them in terms of their studies. It's about what are the other aspects of their personality. Because I've met a lot of people that are highly intelligent, but they've got no social skills. Because their parents are they don't know how to, they're not streetwise. There's other people that basically just have no calmness about it. And what you're going to find is, if you look at children in general, children are getting a lot more excitable, generation on generation. My parents always say it, my uncle say it, he goes, why is that? It's because our environments were different. We didn't have so much Xboxes, we didn't have so much, the nutrition's different. Because like in our house, we don't allow any fizzy drinks or anything like that, because these things will affect, too much sugar affects your children's behaviour. So we're exploring a number of topics here, but the first topic is, as a parent, I think one of the best things you can do is never argue in front of your children. If you have a disagreement, then basically have a discussion in your bedroom, have a discussion somewhere else, but never have a discussion, open discussion in front of your children. Never argue in front of your children. Never get into that when I do this lecture I talk about the jeeb, you use your jeeb as a weapon. Yeah? Where you're just talking and talking and talking. If you use your jeeb as a weapon, your children start doing it. Because they're going to learn that in schools anyway. Because if one child says something, they have to quickly respond. You learn that in schools because the cooler kids are the ones that can respond the quicker, who've got the quickest jive. So they're going to pick up on that. But if you're doing that at home, they're going to start doing that with you. So spiritual parenting, if we look at it, first thing is when you're doing Bhat and Simran, have your kids around you. Okay? Even if they're asleep, have them around you. Bring them into your room. If you've got Maharaj at home, then basically bring them into that room. If you haven't got Maharaj at home, bring them into your bedroom and do Bhat Simran around them. Even if they're asleep, doesn't matter. Let them be asleep, but have them around you when you're doing Simran. Because the spiritual vibes of that, they will pick up on. Secondly, when they do get up, get them into the habit of at least doing Japji Sahib every day. I've met so many people when I've done university lectures. There was one I specifically remember in Manchester where I met a girl who had a total skinhead and she had tattoos all over her, and she basically came to my lecture, and when I'd done the lecture afterwards she goes, "Baji, it was a really good lecture," and she wanted to learn more about Sikhi. So I said to her, "Innit, how did you come into, what made you come to this thing?" And she goes, "My parents are not into Sikhi at all, they're total Gurdwara, and I've been into the whole rock and roll thing and everything else." But she goes, "My grandma, she used to do Japji Sahib part with me." And I said to her, "Goes, is that Japji Sahib part that's brought you here today?" You know, it's that one or two things. Every person that has that puzzle. And there's one Munda we met in California when I was doing a camp out in Yuba City. In California, Sikhs have been there for 4 or 5 generations. So he goes, my great grandparents were one of the first people in Stockton Gurdwara when they set up the Gurdwara. This was in the 1900s. And he goes, basically, they were Amritaris. They married a Mexican woman because there was no, they couldn't allow immigration there because only so they were married Mexican women. And he goes, afterwards, he goes, my grandparents, had gears, but they knew nothing about Sikhi. He goes, my parents are total Gori. And he goes, his name was Cameron, but afterwards his name was Singh. And he googled Singh, and then he came across our camp. And I said to him, I go, just that name Singh has brought you to this camp. Because I personally believe that if you have any link with the Guru in your life, it doesn't matter what else happens in your life, it will always bring you back. I've met so many youth. There's one Munda in Slough who was known as one of the biggest drug dealers in Slough when we were growing up, when we were Monday. And he was really rough Munda. But when he was young, he basically, he had chula because his parents were Amritari. And his sister, she's really June Bibi. And every time I used to meet him, I used to say to him, especially after I get my kids, I goes, "You're going to become a singer again one day. You're going to become a singer again one day. You're going to leave this life and everything." And he said to me that, he goes, all the other Amritaris, they used to shun me. He goes, "You're the only one that still talked to me." And he goes, "You always stick in my mind that you said to me that you're going to become a singer again." And he goes, one day it got so bad for him that he stole from his parents. He was in so much money problems, he went home and he stole his parents' TV to service his drug habit. And that night when he got caught by the coppers, he rang us up and he goes, "I need your help." And so we went there, we bailed him out at the police station, and we said to him, we did a das for him that night. He goes, "I need to give up drugs," and we did a das for him. And he was the only one, the first person I've seen who didn't go cold turkey. I don't know if you know what cold turkey is. It's basically your body starts shaking to get the drugs out of your system. And then he started doing a lot of seva. He got involved in Khalsa, he got involved in a lot of things, and he's a police officer now, and he does a lot of seva. And that's the thing, everything goes into cycles.
One extreme to the other. One extreme to the other.
Yeah, because it works well for him, because he knows, I think he's now a social worker actually, he's left the police, but essentially he helps a lot of people because he's been through it. So, with your children, if you give them that little piece of that puzzle at a very young age, whether it's a little bit of Simran, Japji Sahib parts, a little bit of Bana, because some people have said to my singing, I've said to you a few times that, basically, how come your kids wear dastana? Because my kids take dastana off all the time. You know? Whereas Mahavir, he'll cry if his dastar's not on. You know? And Gorma was the same, etc. And it's a natural thing. It's not something that you can teach a child. All you can do is basically just do a das for them, just do similar for them, and you find naturally they start having love for these kind of things. You know? And the more you do art, I was in Toronto Smargham about 3-4 years ago, and in Toronto Smargham I met this couple, and they're actually director level on Apple computers. You know, both of them, Amritari Sarvaloy Singh and Singhani, they both live in Seattle, and basically they're at the Smargham, done loads of kirtan, etc. And she was pregnant, and we were thinking, where's this sound coming from? And then afterwards she said to me, she goes, "I've got an iPad under my salwar kameez." And she had an iPad next to where her room was, and it just had Vani going on it. And she goes, basically, I'm giving them kind of things to my child. And this is what you're going to realise. I don't know, those of you who are mothers, if you have a pregnancy and you're stressed out, yeah, naturally you're going to find is that kind of stress reflects on your babies. You find that children has less attention. You know, like they said, attention deficit disorder. You find that if you're stressed out as a mother during your pregnancy, or if your nutrition's not good, you know, and then basically your children have less attention span. If you have a lot of surge in your pregnancy, your children have a lot of surge. It's a natural consequence of your mental state and your physical state. Then the next thing we're going on to in terms of is nutrition. The better the nutrition in your house, the healthier you are as a family. And often this starts from mothers. It's stereotypical again, but most of the cooking is done there. And unless you've got very good husbands who are good cooks. But essentially, if you've got high sugar, high salt, and your children get naturally used to it. So if you're having a lot of takeaway foods, you're having less home-cooked foods. Because I once saw a video on parenting, and the person in America as a doctor, he goes, if you've got anything processed in your house, you've got bad nutrition. And I look at most people, most of the things they eat, even if it's vegetarian, is processed. He goes, that's bad nutrition. And you look at everything in terms, especially if you look at in our ancestry, we've never had anything processed. If you look, kisan sige, so if you have a lot of natural fruit, a lot of natural, you're cooking your own sabjiyan, dala, or even if it's things like pastas or pizzas, because it's interesting, if you have, they say there's two things that never have no benefit to your body at all. Yeah? And one of them things is potatoes, and the second thing is cheese. And if you look at a lot of Western food that people eat the most has potatoes and cheese in it. Both these two things have no benefit to your body at all. And so essentially, even if you're making pizzas and stuff, if you're basically, instead of putting cheese on there, you put spinach leaves on there, you find it's just as tasty. You can adapt everything to make it healthy. And so you need to start looking at your nutrition, because your children's behaviour is based on their nutrition. If you give them something which is takeaway food, junk food, you watch that afternoon, their behaviour is a lot more hyper. And so again, that comes part of parenting as well. And if you teach them good nutrition at a young age, then basically, for example, I'm now 39 and I still don't have a filling. Because from a young age, from day one, we were never allowed Coke or anything in our house. So we always drank juice and dod. My parents never. And I look at some of my cousins, you know, they're age of 12 and 13, they got loads of fillings. You know? So all of these things come in a cycle. So these are all parts of your natural parenting. If you're putting all these things in, and you're showing your children this is a good way of living, because if they want to go out and they might have the odd Coke, because if you don't give them, if you totally deny them these things, then they get curious and they go to them more. But if you basically say to them, look, you can have a little bit occasionally when you're out, but basically in our house we don't do this, so because it doesn't become a habit. So you've got the thing about Simran, you've got the thing about Bard, then you've got the thing about nutrition. All of these things massively affect the mental state of the child. Yeah. So the next thing is virtues. It's the way that you talk, because a child from a natural age of 0 to 2 always looks at his mother. Would always look at Ma. From the age of 2 to 5 is the father. Will always look at the father. From the age of 5 to 13 it's their peers at school. This is from the British Medical Association. It's their peers at school. So they will basically talk, act, dress, everything like their friends are doing. From the age of 13 is who inspires them. And this is what a lot of people get wrong. Because a lot of people that are parents from Punjab, they're not used to that. They're used to until the age of 18, 19 that you will always listen to us. But the reality is it's the age of 13. When they get to the age of 13, you have to become inspirational parents. If you're hypocritical parents, your children will never follow you, because they see the hypocrisies in everything you do. Yeah. So if you say that basically Sikhi is like this, but you behave in your house totally different, your children pick up on that and they go away from Sikhi. Yeah. If you're inspirational parents, you show that actually I have said in my life, I speak politely, we treat each other, we do seva in the house, everything else like that. It becomes natural for your children. Yeah? Because otherwise, whoever inspires them the most, that's who they follow. So if it's football, if it's rock stars, if it's rap music or whatever, that's who they will be most interested in. And that's the thing. This is what we've got to realise about life, is that you can never force anyone to follow you or love you or respect you. You can only love someone, respect someone back. So with your children, if you expect them to always be agyakari, this is Punjabi loves, huh? Because I've realised this myself in terms of Sikhi as well, is that most Punjabi families, they don't naturally want their kids in Sikhi. They just want their kids to be agyakari, huh? Which means that they just want them to do what they say. Because often if they're hypocritical, they don't want their kids to pick up on it. Ke dad tu shrab peena hai, dad tu meat khana hai, dad tu paath nahi karda, dad tu gursikh hona hai. They don't want them to pick up on them things. So they don't naturally want to bring them towards too much gursikhs. But what they want them to do is just say, what your dad kehda wahi bas kar lo. And this is the reality is different. Because this is why we're now getting a generation, if you guys travel just as much as I do, is that basically you used to have a generation before where the parents were desperate for their kids to be in Sikhi. Now we've got the opposite. We've got kids all in Sikhi and their parents are not. The kids are basically learning, the kids are basically seeing Sangat, the kids are learning about the aspects of Sikhi, but they're not seeing role models in their parents. And this is a problem as well, because then some children, they start disrespecting their parents, and that is against Gurmat. And this is what a lot of people don't realise. Even if your parents are not in Sikhi, you should always have the utmost respect for them. Bhai Gurdasi's vars are very clear on this. You should always have the utmost respect for everybody. And so, in terms of us, Islam virtues are very, very important. And then virtues again come back to the base thing about Simran. And this is where a lot of people take Red and other things to such an extremes, and it causes a lot of problems in people's houses. I'm always been a very person who's had different views on these kind of things. My views on these kind of things are always that basically your first Red is your Nitanam, your second Red is your Amritvela, and the third Red is respect for everybody. And then if you can follow things like whether it's Babik or anything else like that, but don't cause glace in your houses. Because then you're doing the opposite to what that thing is. If your Red is causing you to have glace in your house, it's keeping you away from Naam. And your Red is there to protect your Naam. So it's very important you have balance, because a gursikh is like a glass of water. You can ripple it, you can touch it, the ripple's there, but ekdam fe se charge on that. And that's a very good...
What if the glaze starts because you want to come into Sikhi? Because the kids that want to come to Sikhi, sometimes they want to, maybe it's the husband or just the wife wants to come to Sikhi.
When I went to Kaurs Camp for the first time, I never knew any Amritaris. I was a Munna, and it was actually Munna that convinced me to come to Kaurs Camp, because he was at an event and he basically said to me, he goes, there's this Kaurs Camp happening, and he goes, there's loads of Apne Munde there, and you know, we'll go there, play football, we have a bit of a dog. And I goes, alright, we'll go with it, innit? And though me and him came to Sikhi that same year, he was a pharmacist, but my parents, they were really happy at the fact that I kept my gears. He had the total opposite effect. His dad, when he kept his gears for the first time and said, I'm going to keep at the start, his dad actually wrestled him to the floor and he put a bottle of whiskey in his mouth. And this is the kind of things that he was dealing with, where basically if you bought bana at home, his dad used to cut it with scissors and told them bana. And eventually what happened was is that a few gursikhs got together, we got him some money, and then when he went to university we just bought him a flat. All the Slav gursikhs got together, and so he was living away from his parents. And we've had to do this a few times down south, where the gursikhs just come and financially help out people. And basically then he went to university, became a pharmacist. Gurmat Singh got him his Nandkaraj done. And then I remember when he bought his actual first house after he graduated, his parents came there and they were saying to all the rest of us, "Sanu mani and sade munde ne done, amritari ho gaya," and etc. And this is the thing, some people have it very hard. There's a couple of things that I know who had it very hard because they came into Sikhi, but their wives weren't interested, and their wives used to come and say to us, "Baji, I respect the fact that he's in Sikhi, but he's not who I married, and I didn't make this choice." And I respect that they're basically honest with me in it and saying that. But I used to always say to them, I goes, don't force them, just keep doing Ardas, keep doing part for them. Because this is the thing, it's all about your aura. The more you do glace with people, the more they do glace back with you. The more you don't do glace with people, the quicker they give up. So recently we were in Northampton. There was a Munda in Northampton who was just coming to Sikhi. His parents are not to Sikhi at all, and they're very anti him coming into Sikhi. And even when he invited me to do a talk at the Gurdwara, where all his family were, and I did the talk, and afterwards his mama started saying to him, "Tu sada respect nahi karda, tu aar Singhani jadi respect karda." And he just said to me, he goes, "Mama ji, look, basically I will always respect you, and if I've done anything wrong, just forgive me." And if you always maintain that level of respect and nimarta in front of anyone, regardless of what you have to put up with, eventually people stop. People give up, say manana nahi hega, and basically, but if you go one, they just trying to find one thing in you, and then they'll make a big deal of it. And so it's all about you maintaining your sage. But the other thing I found with all them three Munde, all their bibia, all their wives are now in Sikhi and they're all in Murtali. Because we gave them all the same advice, which is basically just do your part. It might take you another 3-4 years before you take Amrit, but you just do your part and just basically prepare yourself more. And never force your Singhani, and basically just wait. And sometimes that's often better things, because sometimes the more people wait before they take Amrit, the more they basically get themselves ready, the more part and Simran they do, the more effect it has. When I took Amrit, they had a huge effect on me. I was basically, I was unconscious 3 times in that Amrit job. It wasn't because there was anything special about me, it was just basically, it was just that I knew exactly what I was there for. And that's the thing, sometimes people are not ready for it, they don't know exactly what they're there for. And if you know exactly why you're there, when you do take Amrit, it has a much bigger impact on you. And I was also very lucky that I had already been blessed with the Sangat surrounding me that basically helped me after I took Amrit. Because they were the ones that were saying to me, "You've got to come around to Amritullah, you've got to come around to Amritullah, you've got to come here, you've got to do this." So I went through a very specific process. And that's the thing with a lot of you. Because if Naam becomes the centre of your family, everything in your family falls place, actually rippled out. And I think that's very important that you basically have them links with everybody around you. Because where is Naam, if that becomes the centre of it, there's no house that never has any problems. It's about how you deal with the problems. You know? If you deal with them with understanding, you deal with them with sage, you find solutions so much quicker. And you won't get glaze. And one of the things that I find very difficult, especially when we get involved in sevas, is that how quickly people turn their seva into glaze. Whereas I'm very specific in the way I like to do things, where basically I just like to be involved in positive things, and I just don't, if there's too much glaze, I'll just walk away. Because I don't need that. I'm going somewhere in my life, and I want to get there, and I don't need too many distractions. So I just do what I can do, and that's it. And that's why it's very important to me. It's the way you live your life. It's basically, either some people revel in them kind of things, other people walk past it. And I think if you want to get somewhere in life, you've got to be very, very clear in where your destination is. And for me, my destination is that basically, I want to have an impact on the world, but more important, I want to have an impact on myself. And so, if you're like that, you make your children like that, you make the people around you like that, because them kind of decision making, that kind of positivity ripples out. And then your children, parenting becomes very, very easy. When your children become naturally understanding through the rhythm of the sage, parenting becomes very easy. Does that make sense? Because if you're constantly doing Simran with your children, if you've got that child in your hands and you're doing Simran with that child really enjoys that kind of thing. Yeah? A lot of people, I've never understood, when people have children, they go and give them a separate cot in a separate bedroom. It never made sense to me. Up until 4 or 5, my children always slept with us. It creates such a natural bond with you as parents. Yeah, they will sleep with us. Even now they have got their separate bedroom. In the middle of the night, they will still come and sleep with us. It's still, you have that level of piyar. You know, they know that any time, that is very open for them. That thing is very open. But what happens then is that them children also see you getting up. Them children also see you doing Simran. That becomes natural for them. So it's not a case of like when we came into Sikhi, we realised this is what Amritullah is. They know of it from a young age. And so often we found when Gorma was very young, even when she was about 2-3 years old, times she would just go up to the bedroom and just start sitting there and do Simran all by herself, because it's so natural for them. For them it's so natural. When they're stressed out at school, they would sit there and start doing Simran, because it becomes a natural thing for them. And that is the best gift as a parent you can give your child, to make them realise that they're never alone. They can do Simran all the time. If they're stressed, they can do Simran. If they're scared, they can do Simran. And this is like Mahavir. He's always talking about how he's going to be this great warrior and he's going to be a Jujana and everything. Reality, he's a little skinny little thing. But the he just got this natural thing about him in terms of his Sikhi. And that comes because he will just sit there and he'll just do his Simran. He'll just sit there and he'll start singing shabds. Yeah? And if you put your children in that environment, that's becomes natural. But if you put your children in Teletubbies environment, in children's BBC environment, yeah, they have a little insight to that, but that takes over their lives. Or like football and Xbox just takes over their lives, and it's FIFA is everything. And so you need to be looking at these things in terms of give them a little insight to it, so they're not curious, but then make them realise that there's actually something a lot better. And then their best toy becomes their doubler, their best toy becomes their budget. That's the one they like playing with more. And that is far natural, better way of doing things. And if you start doing Simran if you're doing Kirtan for yourself, your children naturally become Kirtan. You know, if you start doing Path for yourself, your children naturally become Pathis. Because they see that when my parents got free time, they're doing Path and they're doing Simran, or they read. And then they naturally start picking up on that. It's like you'll often find a person who's a businessman, their son becomes a businessman or their daughter becomes a businessman. Because they pick up business tricks very young. Yeah? In the same way, if a person starts developing their Gursikhi nature, they'll do that. So I can with a lot of pride, I can basically say that I'm a son of parents who've never argued. I've never seen my parents argue. Naturally, it's rubbed off on me. Yeah? In the same way, if you are that kind of parents, you create that cycle in your family as well. Because in previous generations, they could argue all their lives, but they would never divorce. But nowadays, they argue a little and they divorce straight away. And then it's us as parents that basically have to pick up the pieces afterwards. And these things become more and more common, and then people really think that basically the reality is that you create the choices in your lives. Yeah, no one's life is going to be problem free, but what you can do is reduce the risk of problems. If you can reduce the risk of problems by maintaining as much Vani and Simran around it, the next thing I would say is sincerity. It's amazing for me the amount of gursikhs I meet that don't talk to Waheguru, and that's never made sense to me. Because even as a Monna, I used to talk to Waheguru. You know, for me that is the first thing of Sikhi, that you've got something there that you're talking to. So in your mind you're talking to it, and you basically have discussions with it, or you have conversations with it. And the amount of times that people say to me, I basically go to programs, I keep my rep, but I don't know where Waheguru is. And I was sort of, hey, because Waheguru is always around you. Waheguru is always there. I don't know if it's just me and I'm a bit weird, but I always get this thing that Waheguru talks to me all the time. It's through shabds, it's through things that happen, it's through people that you meet.
It's belief as well, isn't it? It's believing that, isn't it? If you believe it, you'll hear it, you feel it, you see it. Isn't it?
Yeah. Like sometimes I've done, like recently I was in Toronto and I did a lecture there, and this family came up to me and their daughter was in top of their rag, and she goes, basically, I've had so many problems in my life and your lecture just had every answer to what I was looking for today, and I wasn't even going to come here. And I just said to him, because I couldn't remember what lecture I did. and it's like, because you always do a ardas before you do a lecture, is that basically Jo bhi mara, jo bhi sunana, just and that's why sometimes you can't remember what you actually said. But it has a huge impact on other people's lives. And so for me that happens a lot, because some of the lectures that I've written, like even today's lecture, that was just a hukamnama that we had about 3 weeks ago. And it stuck in me that day. That was the hukamnama of that day, that shut. And so often I find that things happen in my life, business-wise, family-wise and stuff like that, where I want something to happen, and Maharaj shows me something so much better. And so you start talking to Waheguru like that, everything happens. You know? And then after a while it stops becoming coincidences. I'll give you a couple of examples. I was on my dissertation at university. I was always a fan of Bhai Jagjit Singh Ji, and he was coming to UK that weekend as a Ransway in Southall, and I had to hand in my dissertation on Monday morning, and like most students, you leave it to last minute, and so I was thinking, dissertation, Ransway, what should I do? And I thought, forget it, I'm going Ransway. I went to the Ransway, listened to the Ransway all night, came home in the morning, 6 o'clock, and I thought, that's it, no sleep, need to finish my dissertation. Sitting on my computer, even my brother came and helped me out. I should have done that, but he came and helped me out. All through the morning, Sunday morning, all through the day, all through the night, and about 7 o'clock the next morning I finished it. And I was totally sleeping in it, just sitting there like falling asleep. And got it finished, drove to the university, and we had this thing in our university where if you're 5 minutes after 9 o'clock they put a red stamp on it, and that means late and you can't get more than 40%. They don't do that anymore. In them days they used to do that, where if you're past the time they put a red stamp on it late, and your top mark is always 40%. And I got to university and it was about 9:05 and I was totally gutted. I thought, oh my god, and I'd done all this work at Answay, but I got there and they said the binding machine had broken, and they're giving everyone extension till midday so they can go to the town and bind it up. So I got it in, mine's good, I got 82%, and I was really happy. And I was thinking, Answay bhi dekhogi, and dissertation bhi ho gaya. And that's the thing. And then more and more things like that happen in your lives, and after a while you realise there's no coincidences. That marriage is all that began. It's like when I was buying my care home. We saw so many care homes in the country, from as far as Scotland to down to Plymouth, and spent about 3 years looking at care homes. But at the end of it, there were some care homes we had the highest bid for, but they wouldn't sell to us because they wouldn't sell to Asians. And but in the end, and we were so gutted, me and my brother were thinking, oh, that was the ideal care home for us. And then eventually we ended up with a care home which is only 20 minutes from our house. So I always believe that marriage has something better for you. You just got to be basically patient. So even with your children, sometimes you think, I've seen people that want to build mini empires in the Sangat, and they're saying, yeah, I want to control these people, they're part of my crowd. But the reality is I've always believed that you can't control anything. You can't control your children, there's no point even trying. All you can do is, everyone is like a flower, it's like a bud. You basically, as soon as you touch that petal, the petal will break. So instead of trying to control everything in your life, you just got to allow it to blossom. So instead of trying to, I'm not a person that believes in controlling anything. Instead of trying to control things, you just got to allow them to blossom. You just got to give it water, you got to give it sun. So in the same way with your children, you got to basically just give them inspiration, you got to give them sangat, but give them positive sangat. And be very, very careful in terms of what kind of sangat you're giving your children. And you've got to give them an aura, because true sangat is not people that just wear bana. True sangat is people who've got auras, because all these years and all the gursikhs I've met throughout my life, it's the few that we'll always remember. That's why you'll often hear me talking about Bhai Rama Singh, Bhai Jagjit Singh, because they have a huge impact on your lives. It's the few that have these auras that have huge impact on your lives. Last thing, because we've talked quite a lot, as parents, here's a couple of things that I say at the end of my lecture, which is practical parenting. Firstly, avoid harsh discipline. Jiri Punjabi, they often hit their kids, and I think that's very wrong. If you hit your children, after a while all they realise is that you can get hit. It's always better to talk to your children. Dar hona chahida hai, even like Waheguru da sada pe hunda hai, which means we realise that something bad will happen if we do something wrong. But Waheguru never hits us. And I believe Waheguru is like a parent. So avoid harsh discipline. Second thing, explain your rules and decisions to your children. In other words, when you talk to your children, you explain to them, because if you're the kind of father or you're the kind of mother that says, mera karya, jo main kehna kar tenu karna pena, mera karya, jo main kehna kar tenu karna pena, as that child is growing up, they're listening to that. But then that day is going to come when that child is going to say, "Nahi, ahan mera kar hai. Jo main is kar ch karna hai, wo karna paina." Because this is your child and this is you. You are the biggest decision maker in your child's life. But then your child grows up, and then in one day, that day is going to come when they're equal decision makers in their lives. Then that day is going to come when they're greater decision makers in their lives. But then that day becomes when they become decision makers in your life. And so you have to realise that. And often that is a very hard thing for people to take. When they are the ones that are going to decide where you live, they are the ones going to decide how much money you got. They're the ones that are going to decide everything about what you've got in your life. If you respect them, we will always teach our children not just to say Baji and Benji to people older than them, but also to people younger than them. Because the more you give respect to younger people, them younger people realise that these people actually respect me, they respect you back. If you teach your younger people always doing it basically with nicknames and stuff like that, just like Gore do or Apane do, then basically they will never respect them people. But the more you respect your child, the more you make your child believe. From a young age, my father always said to us, he goes, "You're Sikhs," and Sikhs makes the impossible thing possible. So from a young age, he's always taught us that whatever people say to you is impossible, tusi karke dikhao. So whether it's business-wise, whether it's in terms of doing things in community and stuff, we've always had that thing that nothing's impossible. And that's a very important belief that's been put into us by my father. In the same way, the more you make your children believe, the more they will achieve. Because your mind is naturally like that. Your mind will do anything. You can achieve anything if you believe in it. And so basically start doing that. So treat your child with respect, because that respect will always come in a cycle back to you. If you respect your parents and you do seva of your parents, our children at the moment in our house, my grandfather's in his 90s, and our children, every day they see my father, my mother, they basically, how they look after our grandparents. So from a young age, they know that basically, that basically everyone in the house, we look after each other. These visions are very, very important. If you don't have your parents around you and you're not looking after your parents, your children are just going to become like Gore, where they just put people in care homes, or they just put people over your house, or they say, "Tusi bakira, tusi bakira." Next one, be consistent. In other words, your authority is based on wisdom, not power. You as a parent, you have no power over your children. You only can give them wisdom. And a lot of people don't realise the difference. The more you share wisdom with your child, the more they respect you. Half the time, people are embarrassed to talk about wise things to their children. You know all these rituals that people have when they get married? They go to the manya, morningaya, naya. It's all become ritual. Why do people do manya in the morning in the past? Because and they have these sangeets and stuff like that. What was them sangeets? Them sangeets wasn't music. It was basically the elder, the BBI used to get together and say, these are good wisdom for you. And all them Ghane used about wisdom, there were stories, they had fables, they had things. And it was all about, it was all about teaching that child, you need to be responsible now, you need to be respectful now, you need to be like this. So it's about that. Next thing, what you do matters. Because your children constantly analyse everything that you do. How are you speaking? How are you talking? How are you behaving? How do you treat your relatives? Your children naturally analyse everything about you. So what you do matters. And that's when they decide whether you're hypocritical or not. Next thing is, you cannot be too loving. This is a very big thing in Punjabi community. They goes, and I believe that's wrong phraseology. Because it's not laad pyar na bachche nu bigarta, it's because unhone paise de ke bachche nu bigarya. They give him too much khol, ode na bachche nu bigarya. You can never have enough laad pyar with a bacha. You should always be loving with the child. And sometimes people have this thing where they say to the child, "Oh, if you give them too much love, it makes them soft." I don't believe that. I believe you make your children streetwise, but you give them a lot of love. Be involved in your children's lives. Talk to your children every day, and then you should know exactly what's going on in children's lives. What are they doing at school? Every day you should be talking to them. What are you doing at school? What did you do today? Who do you think? 3 questions you should always have the answer to. Where is my child? Who is with my child? And what is my child doing? Over a 24-hour cycle, you should always have the answers to them things. I never understand how Gauri can let their children, 7, 8, 9, 10-year-olds walk the streets at night. That never made sense to me. If you can always answer them 3 things, even if your child's about 18, 19, 20, then basically you've got a good discipline in your house. You should always know that. Foster your child's independence, which means बच्चियां नूं इन्ना ना दबाओ, and this often happens in Punjabi community. वो लोकां तो इन्ने डरदे आ. That's why Muslims and other people are so far more streetwise than our kids. That never happened with our generation. Our generation, we had to be streetwise. You speak to a lot of people that are slightly older. We were all streetwise in our generation. The next generation of kids, because we were in the same streets in the same suburbs. Now you're going into richer suburbs, but you're going to nickel deni. And because of going to nickel deni, you're not streetwise. And our children need to be very, very streetwise. You need to foster their independence. So, I've done a lot of talking there, Anna, and we've basically hopped from many different areas. Has that been helpful?
Yeah.
Because it's just about मैं Clara Pata with loads of thoughts, and it's for you to take away what is helpful for you. Because bear in mind, those of you Monday at the back, you're not married yet, but you're still older brothers and sisters. For those of you who are married and parents, you're parents. But essentially, every single one here, you have an influence in someone's life. Whether it's your sisters, whether it's your younger brothers, cousins, anyone else like that. And you are therefore, you're some kind of role model to them. And you have to look about, are you the right kind of role model for them?
I think that, you know how you're saying about Mahavir and his warrior image and however he wants to be. I think a child's name plays a lot.
It has a huge impact.
On your jivan. So people when you want to take a name, obviously first go to Maharaj and decide, get Hukamnama. Now that doesn't even happen. It's like, I might not like the Hukamnama, so we decided to keep it. My child's name this or that. And I'm like, how can you not?
Afraid that can't be there.
Whatever occurred. Yeah.
This is why, that lecture I did today upstairs, I specifically started on it from the womb. It's because your womb, your connection starts with Waheguru. But as soon as you're born, your connection from that day becomes with the Guru Granth Sahib. But if you don't go to the Guru Granth Sahib, that connection's not there then. And it was quite noticeable because we had a room where at least you would say about half to 3/4 of the room was Amritari. Would you agree? But no one still knew what the Hukamnama was on their birth. And this is what the idea is. I wanted to get people thinking. Because this is a room full of Amritaris, but where's our connection from day one? Because these are things we need to reintroduce. You know what used to happen? Because I was talking about my grandfather. My grandfather, he remembers pre-partition. He's in his 90s. And pre-partition, there used to be no big smagans on this side of Punjab that we see now. The majority of Sikh population lived in Pakistan. And all the big smagans used to have an Nankana Sahib or Punjab Sahib, and he still remembers them big smagans. So if you look at historically, you read your history, and they'll say most of the fighting or the Jijarus that came in pre-independence were from Sindh Ilaka or from the Pakistan kind of areas, Gujranwala and all these kind of places like that. And he will often tell me, he's now really built, but if a child came into someone's house, everyone used to take a seva. Now people go and give Panj Bond. I talk about this in the lecture, innit? That people now go and give Panj Bond, that's going to be Bond Pyarya. Because we make Paisa Pyar. But what used to happen in them days is that basically they used to go to Gurdwara, they used to give them the star. People used to say, I make Gotka, because a lot of things in them days used to handwrite Gotke. I make Gotka, thodi bachi ni likhunga. Because you know where the Amar Kirtan came from? Does anyone know where the Amar Kirtan came from? It's now a Panthak Pustak. But the Amar Kirtan was, there was a Satya Bhai Singh, his name was Darshan Singh Dilruba. Bhai Singh gave him the name Dilruba because his Kirtan, because when he does Kirtan, he's like a Dilruba. It's so amazingly beautiful. That was his Kirtan Putti of all his shabds. And that's why in the front of it, when you open it, it goes dedicated to Swami Dichiri, which is Bhai Singh. Basically, that was his Putti, and you look at the depth of that Putti because every shabd is linked to another shabd. So his understanding of Gurbani was very, very deep. But essentially that was just his Putti, but all the gursikhs had their own Puttiyan. So when a child is born, someone used to say, मैं थोड़े बच्चे मैं प्राण कर दां कि मैं थोड़े बच्चे नो कीर्तन सिखा लूँगा, मैं थोड़े बच्चे नो संध्या दूँगा, मैं थोड़े बच्चे नो दस्तार सिखाऊँगा. So everyone used to take their sevas with this child. Now what it is, everyone just gives £20. When you leave the house, and that's it. And I say like £20 doesn't even buy a box of nappies now. And this is the thing. So the more, because this is like, Singh Sabha is similar to like a model Gurdwara. A lot of people look at this Gurdwara and it's a lot of good practice in this Gurdwara. But the more good practice you can bring into this Gurdwara, the more it filters out. So that's why I specifically mentioned upstairs, if someone comes to Gurdwara, give them the hukamnama framed. Because you can, like at Wakefield Road, they have like a room full of just frames. Because with the Tuesday class, they started framing all the shops, didn't they? You should just have a room, boxes full of these frames you can get from these pound shops or whatever. But every time that something like that happens, frame it, give it to people. It's pre-done for it, and they start putting it in their houses, and it gets people that are artificial in there. Like if that child came today, you know, what would be good practice is if the person on stage, I'll speak to people and saying is in future they say, look, we want people to start taking sevas for this child. And if people start saying, I will take seva of doing this, I will take seva of doing this, and then it will start, because some people just say, look, meri seva hai, main bachche ki sukhni se path karunga. And then it becomes a collective. Because to make one child a good gursikh, it can't be just the parents, it's got to be the whole community. And then every community, everyone's looking out for each other's kids. And that's a very positive thing, especially in a place like Bradford, because, to be honest, there's a reason people like me don't live in Bradford. You have got more, to be honest, you have got more people with Mari Nazar who are looking out for your kids, you know, who do target your kids. I just recently went to Brampton in Toronto. You got a whole laka full of just Sikhs everywhere. Everybody knows everybody's kids, and even though they have their problems with drugs and everything else like that as well, but if you look at the average level of the kids, they're so far better. They might not be in Sikhi, but their behaviour wise is so far better than what we have here. It's because they've got a lucky where everyone's just looking out for their kids. So you have to be a bit more, if you want to live in these kind of lucky, like Bradford, you've got to be more in tune in terms of your parenting skills. And you need to be thinking about these kind of things. Chalo, that's kafi vichar ho gaya. Anything else anyone wants to say? Just to mention that, we recently been to Indiana, and they've got whole villages where everyone's just Amritalis. There's 50,000 Punjabis live there. We're doing lectures there, people living very well there. But essentially the same thing I see there. I see loads of kids, because everywhere they look, they're surrounded by gursikhs. And one thing quite unique, they're gursikhs from every Jathebandi there, but they're all so united. Because essentially they know that anyone can come to their Gurdwara in time with a gun, just like happened out in Wisconsin and stuff like that. But they have a lot of ikka between all of them. But naturally that filters out in all their kids. Their kids are so solid compared to what we have here. And so there's a lot of marriages good for having it around. I was in California and I sat with this couple, they were truckers, and their kids are about 7 or 8, and as soon as they sit in the car, doesn't matter where they're going, they sang all Ruqya Shabs. I was totally amazed. I don't know if you know the Ruqya Shabs, there's about 10 Ruqya Shabs. And every time they sit in the car, they'll sing Ruqya Shabs. It's naturally ingrained in the children. And it's just good practice everywhere you go. I've seen so much good practice about how people live as Sikhs. And it's just getting that bit and just bringing it into your families. Okay? So, I mean, there's a lot of kirpa here, but we should always strive because we can be so much better. We should never stop thinking that we can get better. Full jig maaf karna. Waheguru.